$50,000, I screamed, crushing the legal papers in my fist, my voice echoing across the empty Montana road. The HOA sold my family's 200-acre ranch for 50 grand, barely enough to buy a new pickup, let alone a century-old legacy. I just found out today. And you know what's worse? I stood there watching in horror as bulldozers ripped through the old cottonwoods, knocked down the barn my great-grandfather built with his bare hands, while that witch of an HOA president grinned like she'd just hit the Powerball. My childhood home gone. Our past bulldozed under some developer's vision of progress. All I could do was stand there soaked in October mist, my keys useless in my hand, staring at a fresh sign that made my blood run cold. Private property, Sunset Valley, HOA trespassers will be prosecuted. Behind me, the engine of my rental car ticked as it cooled off. I'd driven straight from the airport after receiving the eviction notice at my law firm in Washington, D.C. 12 hours ago, I was reviewing corporate contracts in a glass tower. Now I was back on the dirt road where my grandfather taught me to drive his old pickup 25 years earlier. This land is in our blood. Jake Grandpa's voice still echoed in my memory. I was 8, sitting on that porch with him, watching the cattle graze in the golden evening light. 4 generations of Morrisons are buried on that hill behind the oak grove. My daddy built this place with his bare hands after the war. Don't ever let anyone take it away from you. But the only thing filling my lungs right now was the dust and the distant whine of construction equipment. The smell of sagebrush was gone, replaced by diesel sawdust and my own panic. Out past the barbed wire where my great-grandfather's barn used to stand, I could see yellow bulldozers turning our winter pasture into a construction site. The family cemetery, the same one where my parents were buried after that car accident where Grandpa now rested, seemed small and fragile, overshadowed by the monstrous skeletons of soon-to-be luxury condos. I looked again at the eviction notice, reading those impossible words. On October 15, 2019, your grandfather voluntarily sold the property 200 acres to the Sunset Valley Homeowners Association for $50,000. The date hit me like a punch. October 15th was 3 days before Grandpa died. 3 days after he'd been unconscious on a ventilator, his body ravaged by the stroke that took his speech in August, his mobility in September. I'd held his hand that final week, whispering to him, praying for a miracle, but he couldn't even open his eyes. Somebody forged his signature while he was dying, while I was sitting in that ICU room helpless, and now the past was being erased one bulldozer at a time. Suddenly, I heard the rumble of vehicles. A black Escalade and a white pickup truck rolled down the dirt road, kicking up clouds of dust that settled on surveyor stakes dotting what used to be our open pasture. I recognized her instantly, Karen Whitfield. Her hair was as perfectly styled as ever, her eyes cold and calculating, every inch the HOA queen she'd made herself out to be. She dominated every HOA meeting for 5 years, turning neighbor against neighbor, always with that icy, I'm in charge smile. Mr. Morrison. She called out, her voice projecting authority to anyone in earshot. I'm surprised to see you here. Didn't you receive our certified notice? I raised the crumpled papers, my hand shaking. I received it. But there's a massive mistake. My grandfather never sold this land. He couldn't have. The man climbing out of the pickup looked like he'd just stepped out of a magazine ad for midlife success. Sharp suit, perfect hair, smile that belonged on a billboard. He extended a manicured hand I didn't take. David Sterling, Sterling Development Corporation. I'm afraid there's no mistake, son. We have all the proper documentation. Your grandfather made a very wise decision for his family's financial security. I laughed, but it came out jagged and raw. Financial security. This land is worth $2 million at minimum. You got it for $50,000. That's not a sale. That's theft. Karen's eyes went hard. That's a very serious accusation, Mr. Morrison. Grief can make people see conspiracies where none exist. Your grandfather was struggling. When his health declined, he reached out to us. My grandfather was on a ventilator when this sale supposedly happened. He'd been unconscious for weeks. The only thing he needed was a doctor, not a realtor. Sterling's smile went cold. The documentation is ironclad. Notarized, filed with the county, executed according to state law. If you have concerns about your grandfather's mental capacity, perhaps you should have been more involved in his care. The words stung. I'd flown home every weekend for months, handled his medical bills. But I trusted he could handle his affairs. I never imagined anyone would prey on a dying man. Behind them, workers started tearing down the split-rail fence my great-grandfather built in 1947. In the distance, fresh concrete bled across the old pasture, the beginnings of condos that had soon blocked the mountains my family cherished for over a century. "This isn't over," I said, stepping back toward my car. "I'll fight this in court. I'll expose whatever fraud you committed here." Karen's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Actually, it is over. I understand this is difficult, but progress requires sacrifice. Outdated traditions must make way for the future. You'll see what we're building will benefit everyone." As I drove away, rage and grief knotted in my chest. 4 generations wiped out by paperwork and corporate greed. That evening, as I sat in the shabby motel, my phone buzzed with a message from an anonymous number. "Your grandfather wasn't their first victim. I've been watching them for 3 years. We'll contact soon. A friend." A minute later, Marcus, my law school roommate, called. He specialized in property fraud and elder abuse. He promised to fly in and help. But what I didn't see was Karen nodding to a woman hiding behind a stand of cottonwoods, or the phone call she made as soon as my taillights vanished. Phase 1 complete. The grandson showed up right on schedule. He's angry, but he doesn't understand the scope yet. Marcus will handle containment. Yes, everything's proceeding exactly as we planned. 25 years ago. That night, with old family photos scattered on the motel table, one question burned. If the sale was legitimate, why did Karen's hands tremble when I mentioned the timeline of Grandpa's illness? And why in all his estate papers wasn't there one letter about selling the land that was his life's work? The photo I held showed Grandpa teaching 7-year-old me to rope fence posts, his hands steady, his smile gentle. Persistence, Jake. Morrisons don't give up when something matters. The ranch mattered. The truth mattered. And whoever thought they could steal from a Morrison was about to find out just how persistent I could be. The Sunset Valley Motel had seen better days. Let me tell you, orange carpet faded by the sunwood paneling straight out of the 70s. The smell of old coffee and cheap air freshener fighting for dominance. I converted that tiny table into a war room, every square inch covered with county records, medical files, and the legal paperwork that had landed like a bomb in my life. 3 days in one truth was crystal clear. The deal stank to high heaven. Our ranch was nearly 2 square miles, valued at over $2 million by the county, but Karen's paperwork claimed a sale for $50,000, and nobody in their right mind would believe that was legit. I stopped trying to make sense of the math and started looking for a loose thread. I picked up the sale document for the 100th time, squinting at Grandpa's alleged signature through a hardware store magnifying glass. The handwriting looked steady, too steady, but I'd watched Grandpa try to sign his name after the stroke. His hand shook so bad he could barely hold a pen, and his signature, when he could even manage it, was more like a kid's scribble than anything else. The signature on this sale, smooth, confident, nothing like a dying man's hand. My phone buzzed. Marcus. "Any updates on the documents? I can drive up this weekend to strategize." Even through text, he sounded hopeful, helpful. He was the only bright spot in this hellish mess. Having a friend who specialized in property law felt like maybe, just maybe, I had a shot. Next stop, the county records office. Janet, the clerk, had that look. Steady hands, tired eyes, the sort of person who'd seen every trick in the book. "Looking for filings on the Morrison Ranch," I muttered. She slid over a stack of documents, but what caught my eye was the notary stamp Elizabeth Park. I ran her name through the Montana Secretary of State database and stopped cold. Elizabeth Park had died in March 2017, almost 2 years before she allegedly notarized Grandpa's signature. Dead people don't notarize documents. I sat back in my creaky motel chair just staring. Whoever did this was banking on nobody double-checking the notary. They were wrong. My laptop pinged with another anonymous email. Check the Riverside Ranch case from 2021. Same pattern, same players. The lawyer threw the case. Riverside Ranch. Where had I heard that? Quick search brought up a photo. Middle-aged couple, devastated, standing in front of a foreclosure sign. The article told the same story: generational farmland lost. After a dispute with the Pine Valley HOA involving forged documents. Their lawyer, Marcus Carter. I sat there, coffee gone cold, reading and rereading. Marcus had represented the Wilson family against an HOA using fraudulent paperwork. Clear evidence of fraud. The family lost everything. Marcus advised them to settle, said fighting would bankrupt them. My stomach clenched. He knew the playbook, the players, the strategies. So why had he lost such an open and shut case? Before I could spiral further, my phone rang, a local number. Mr. Morrison. This is Mrs. Henderson. I live on Maple Street, a couple miles from your grandfather's place. I think I have something to tell you about Karen Whitfield. And what happened to your grandfather? Her voice was soft, but there was something urgent behind it. 20 minutes later, I sat at Mrs. Henderson's kitchen table, the smell of fresh cookies almost masking the weight of what she had to say. 78 sharp eyes, the memory of someone who'd seen too much. I saw Karen at your grandfather's house a lot those last months. She began pouring tea. She'd park behind the barn, out of sight. Always went to the back door, never knocked on the front. I asked if Grandpa had invited her. That's just it. I don't think he did. I was bringing him soup one day in September, and I heard them arguing. Karen was saying, "Let's make this easy on everyone." And your grandfather, well, his voice was slurred, but he told her clear as day, "Get off my property." Mrs. Henderson reached into a drawer and handed me a little notebook. Started writing things down. Call it old woman's intuition, but something felt wrong. Karen came back 3 more times before he went to the hospital. The last time was October 10th, 5 days before that signature date. But your grandfather collapsed the night before. Ambulance took him to St. Mary's at 6 in the morning. Karen showed up that afternoon, spent 2 hours inside. But I called the hospital that night. He'd been unconscious since they brought him in. The timeline was a smoking gun. Karen had access to Grandpa's personal papers, his checkbooks, everything she'd need to forge a sale while he lay dying in a hospital 30 miles away. And there's more, Mrs. Henderson added, her voice barely above a whisper. I remember Karen Whitfield back in the 90s real estate business got in trouble for fraud. Your grandfather helped expose her, if I recall. My head spun. A personal vendetta stretching back decades. A pattern of targeting elderly landowners, forging documents using dead notaries. And Marcus, my friend, right in the middle. Back at my motel war room, I started digging into Sterling development. David Sterling wasn't just a developer, he was a financier with projects all over the region. Every time an HOA acquired property, Sterling Development ended up with it built condos, flipped the land for 10 times what they paid. My math said Sterling made over $15 million in the past 3 years alone by running the same scam over and over. Another text from Marcus: Jake, HOA disputes can be tricky. Maybe we should consider a settlement. Litigation can drag on, cost a fortune. What if I reached out to their legal team informally? That sinking feeling hit me. Same advice he'd given the Wilson family. The same pattern push for settlement, accept pennies on the dollar, the HOA and Sterling get rich. Maybe I was paranoid, but I started answering Marcus's ticks with as little information as possible. Still gathering facts, I told him not ready to commit. But now every late-night phone call, every strategy session, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched, not just by the HOA, but by someone on my own team. As night fell, I looked at the old fencing pliers from Grandpa's tool bench, turning them in my hands like a talisman. I made a silent promise to expose the fraud, to recover our land, and to make damn sure nobody else got hurt the way the Wilson family had. But first I needed to know, was my best friend really trying to help me or set me up for failure? The answer would come a lot sooner than I expected, and it would blow my world apart. The Sunset Valley Community Center. You know the kind of place I'm talking about, a cinder block relic from the 60s, walls lined with photos of long-gone mayors and charity bake-offs, linoleum so worn it had grooves from 5 decades of folding chairs. My great-grandfather's name was still on a bronze plaque by the door. He helped build this center back when community meant something. Tonight, that word was a joke. The monthly HOA meeting was packed, standing room only. Word had spread about my accusations, and about 80 neighbors crammed into the stuffy hall, a mix of old rancher families and the new folks with luxury SUVs and manicured dogs. Karen Whitfield sat at the front, perfectly composed in her navy blazer, surrounded by a board of nervous yes-men. She looked like a queen, bored and impatient with the rabble. She called the meeting to order with her trademark icy smile. The chair recognizes Jake Morrison for public comment. I stood holding a fat folder, medical records, handwriting samples, county documents. My hands shook, but my voice came out strong. I'm here because the Sunset Valley HOA illegally stole my family's 200-acre ranch through fraud and forged documents. The room exploded. Old-timers gasped. Younger residents shot me dirty looks, worried about their property values, not my grandfather's grave. Karen banged the gavel. Order Mr. Morrison. Those are serious accusations. I hope you have evidence to support such inflammatory claims. Oh, I have evidence, I said, holding up the first page. This is the alleged sale agreement dated October 15th, 2019. My grandfather's signature, except he'd been unconscious on a ventilator for 5 days at that point. I let that hang in the air, then waved the hospital admission records for all to see. He was dying, unable to speak or hold a pen. The timeline is impossible. Karen interrupted, her voice sugar and steel. Your grandfather was struggling financially, medical bills, property upkeep, declining health. He made a practical decision. He couldn't have made any decision, I shot back. He was in a medically induced coma, unable to communicate or write. And here's the kicker, this sale was allegedly notarized by Elizabeth Park. She died in 2017, 2 years before she supposedly signed off on my grandfather's sale. Dead people don't notarize documents. There was a long, chilly silence. Even Karen's board looked nervous now. She recovered quickly. These accusations are outrageous. Mr. Morrison is clearly suffering from grief-induced paranoia. Our documentation was handled by professionals. Like David Sterling, I pointed to the back where the developer himself sat in a $1,000 suit. The same guy whose company magically wins every HOA-acquired property in the county. He's already started construction on land you stole. Sterling stood, white smile flickering. I resent that implication. Sterling Development follows every law. If you have issues, take them up with your grandfather's estate attorney. Funny, I said. My grandfather never told a soul he was planning to sell his life's work. Not his lawyer, not his doctor, not me, nobody. And you expect us to believe this was all above board? I could feel the crowd shifting. Some old faces looked at me with new concern. Mrs. Henderson up front raised her hand. I saw Karen at the Morrison Ranch several times during Robert's last months. She always went to the back door. I heard them argue. He told her to get off his property. That was in September when he could still speak. Karen cut in. I was visiting in a professional capacity to offer help for struggling elderly landowners. That's what the HOA does, a service. I laughed, bitter as black coffee. Some service. Forging signatures, using a dead woman's notary stamp, that's enough. Karen banged the gavel. Mr. Morrison, you're out of order. These conspiracy theories have no place in a civilized meeting. You can't silence the truth, I said, raising my voice over the noise. This HOA is a criminal enterprise preying on the elderly, stealing land. My family isn't your first victim, and if nobody stops you, we won't be the last. She waved at security. 2 burly guards moved toward me. You're going to have me removed from the community center my great-grandfather helped build? I asked, voice cracking with anger and disbelief. Karen's lips curled in a smirk. I'm removing a disruptive individual for the safety and comfort of our residents. Maybe when you've recovered from your grief, you can participate in adult conversation. That's when an unexpected voice cut through the tension, calm and confident. Actually, Karen, I think everyone would benefit from hearing the rest of Mr. Morrison's evidence. Marcus Carter, my old friend, my law school roommate, stood in the doorway with his briefcase. My relief was instant. Thank God you're here, I called. He nodded, moving to the front of the room, projecting authority. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Marcus Carter. I specialize in property fraud and elder abuse. I've reviewed Mr. Morrison's evidence. What we're dealing with is systematic criminal activity. His words hit like a sledgehammer. People began to clap. Even Karen's stone-faced board members exchanged nervous glances. I'm calling for a full forensic audit of all HOA financial records, Marcus continued. I'm demanding production of all documents relating to property acquisitions over the last 5 years. And I'm putting this board on notice. Federal authorities will be investigating this matter. Karen went pale but managed to keep her chin up. Mr. Carter, you're not a member of this HOA. You have no standing to make demands. I'm Mr. Morrison's counsel, Marcus replied. I have standing to protect my client's constitutional rights and family property. This meeting is being recorded. Anything you say can and will be used in civil and criminal proceedings. The applause grew louder. Karen tried to adjourn the meeting. Marcus reminded her, you can't do that without a vote. He promised a formal legal challenge in the morning. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus pulled me aside. Great job tonight, Jake. You rattled them. Let me handle communications from here. These people only respond to legal pressure. I thanked him genuinely. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt hope. Marcus was brilliant, respected. He believed in our case. But what I couldn't see, what none of us could see, was Marcus lingering in the parking lot, slipping over to Karen's Escalade as the crowd faded away. Don't worry, he whispered through her window. I'll make sure Jake doesn't get too far. Stick to the timeline. The war for my family's legacy had begun. I just didn't realize I was fighting it alone. I should have known the universe wasn't about to cut me a break. The next morning, under my motel door, I found an envelope, cheap manila, my name scrawled in block letters. No postmark, no return address, just dread. Inside a stack of 8x10 photos. Marcus, my so-called friend, shaking hands with Karen Whitfield outside a steakhouse in Billings. Marcus sitting across from David Sterling in what looked like a private office. Marcus taking a fat envelope from a third man I didn't recognize. Dates and timestamps scrawled on the back, all within the past 6 months, long before I knew the ranch was even up for grabs. At the bottom, a note. Your lawyer isn't your friend. Check his bank deposits from Sunset Valley LLC. Count how many families he's betrayed. Trust no one until you know the truth. Someone who knows. I stared at those photos until my eyes ached. Marcus looked right at home, comfortable, not cornered. The last photo was the worst. Marcus and Karen in a glass-walled conference room, paperwork everywhere. In the corner, the words, Morrison Ranch Acquisition Timeline, peeked out from a file. My head spun. How deep did this go? How long had they planned it? My phone rang. Marcus. Against every instinct I picked up, needed to hear his lies for myself. Jake. Good news, I spoke with Karen's legal team this morning. They're willing to negotiate a settlement. $300,000 for a clean resolution. No admission of wrongdoing, but it's 6 times what your grandfather got. Think about it. No more fighting. Enough to start fresh. He sounded excited, like he was offering me a golden ticket instead of a slap in the face. I looked at the photos, his face grinning back at me from every angle. $300,000 for land worth $2 million. I said, my voice flat. Be realistic, Marcus urged. Litigation drags on. Legal bills add up. Appeals could last years. You could spend your life and lose anyway. This offer gets you out clean. Since when did Marcus ever tell a client to accept a lowball offer when there was obvious fraud? This is elder abuse, Marcus. Dead notaries, forged signatures, impossible timelines, slam dunk for any attorney worth their salt. There was a pause. I could almost hear him calculating. It's not as slam dunk as you think, buddy, Property law is tricky. Trust me, I've handled dozens of these cases. Like the Wilson family. Another pause, longer this time. What about them? Riverside Ranch, 800 acres lost to the Pine Valley HOA. You told them to settle just like you're telling me. That case was different, he snapped. Circumstantial evidence, financial problems they couldn't afford to fight. I saved them from bankruptcy. I scrolled through the news articles on my laptop, reading the same lines again and again, family after family, each one standing in front of a foreclosed property, their attorney Marcus Carter by their side. How many families, Marcus? How many times have you told people to settle, then watch their land go straight to the same HOAs and Sterling Development? Jake, you're not thinking clearly. You're grieving paranoid. Maybe you should take some time before making legal decisions. I'm trying to protect you. Maybe I should check your bank records before deciding who's protecting whom. There was a silence so thick it felt like the bottom dropped out of my world. When Marcus spoke again, his tone was cold, stripped of the old warmth. You're making a mistake. I'm offering you professional counsel. Don't let paranoia ruin a 15-year friendship. Were any of those years real, Marcus? Or have you been playing me since law school? You're being ridiculous. I'll call you tomorrow when you've calmed down. He hung up. I sat there listening to the dial tone, wondering if I'd just lost the only friend I had left. Or if maybe I'd never had a real friend in the first place. I spent the next few hours digging through public records looking for the paper trail, the dirt. And the pattern was clear as day: 9 families. 9 property disputes where Marcus was the attorney. 9 losses, every time the property ended up in Sterling Development's hands within months. Oakwood Farm, Pine Valley Ranch, Willow Creek. Each time Marcus advised settlement, told them fighting was hopeless, and then moved on. And every time the property was worth at least 10 times what the family settled for. I found his state bar financial disclosures. Spotless, no mention of Sterling Development, Sunset Valley LLC, or any HOA-related income. But I knew enough about shell companies to realize that didn't mean squat. The money could be hidden a dozen different ways. Then another text from an unknown local number, Riverside Park. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. East Pavilion. Come alone, bring the photos. Time to learn the truth. Whoever sent the envelope wanted to meet. Maybe it was the friend from those emails, maybe a setup. But at this point, what did I have to lose? That night, I reviewed every document Marcus had prepped for my case. It all looked competent at first, but the more I read, the more I saw his strategy was passive, always cautious, never aggressive. The hearing was scheduled for next Friday, a day I'd already told him I'd be out of state for work. It wasn't incompetence, it was sabotage, plain and simple. My best friend feeding my enemy every move, every hope, every vulnerability. I poured myself a drink, stared out at the empty parking lot, and promised myself they wouldn't take me down easy. I'd go down fighting. The phone rang. Marcus again. I let it go to voicemail. Maybe I was too aggressive about the settlement. Let's meet tomorrow. Fresh eyes, new strategy, whatever you need, whatever happens, I'm still here for you. Yeah, that happened. His voice sounded so sincere, so familiar, it almost broke me. Then another call, unknown number. I picked up. Mr. Morrison, the voice was calm, female, with a hint of something I couldn't place. My name is Elena Wilson. I'm the one who sent those photographs. My family lost the Riverside Ranch. Marcus Carter helped them steal it. If you want to save your land and stop them from hurting anyone else, meet me tomorrow night. But come alone. Don't trust Marcus. He's planning to withdraw your injunction next week and convince you to settle for pennies. The line went dead. I lay awake half the night, haunted by every conversation, every handshake, every moment I'd ever trusted Marcus Carter. Tomorrow night I'd find out the truth, no matter what it cost. Riverside Park, 7 p.m. The kind of place my dad used to take me as a kid to fish for trout and listen to the grown-ups talk about the weather politics and whose hay baler broke down this week. Now it felt like the set of a spy movie. I arrived 20 minutes early, paranoid enough to circle the pavilion twice and check the parking lot for anyone I recognized. My heart thudded as I clutched the manila folder under my coat, Marcus's betrayals in black and white. A woman walked up from the east path, footsteps careful but unafraid, Mid-50s hair streaked with silver, dressed sharp but plain like she knew how to disappear in a crowd. "Mr. Morrison," she called softly. "I'm Elena Wilson. Thank you for coming." She kept her distance at first, smart. I asked her straight, "How do I know you're not working with Karen and Marcus?" She pulled out a fat envelope and slid it across the table between us. 3 years ago, my family lost everything to the same scam. 800 acres. My parents trusted their lawyer, Marcus Carter. I've spent every day since then documenting how they operate. Look inside. I did. Bank records, photographs, even audio recordings. Dozens of properties, hundreds of thousands in laundered payments, names that matched the shell companies I'd found online. The scope of it knocked the breath out of me. "How'd you get all this?" I asked, voice hoarse. Elena gave a sad, small smile. "Used to be an investigative journalist, covered financial crimes, corruption, you name it. When they ruined my family, I started digging. Now I've got enough for the feds, but they need a victim willing to fight, someone who won't settle." She pulled out a digital recorder and set it on the stone table. "Listen." It was scratchy, but the voices were clear. Karen and Sterling talking like the world was theirs. "The grandson's going to be trouble. He's a lawyer, knows how to read documents. Sterling. That's what we pay Marcus for. He'll keep Morrison focused on settlements instead of discovery. Same playbook as Riverside Ranch." I shut off the recorder, hands shaking. They'd mapped out my destruction before Grandpa was even cold. Every legal move, every conversation, every delay already accounted for. "There's more," Elena said, laying down a spreadsheet of bank payments, regular deposits, from Sterling's shell companies to Marcus Carter, $10,000 or $20,000 at a time. The dates matched up with every property Marcus had lost to the HOA over the last 3 years. "He's been doing this for years," Elena said quietly. "He builds trust, then convinces families they can't win, then hands them over to Sterling for pennies. The Wilson case was just his first big success. My parents trusted him like a son. He told them my father was just being paranoid. They settled for 75 grand, land worth over $1 million. I swallowed hard, looking at my own hands, how they shook with anger and shame. "Why are you helping me?" I finally asked. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and handed me a faded photograph, my grandfather, younger arm around a friend I didn't recognize. "That's my dad," Miguel, Elena said. "They were neighbors 40 years. Your grandfather tried to warn my father about Karen, said she was asking questions, same as she did with other families before they lost their land. My father didn't listen. He trusted his lawyer." She fixed me with a steady gaze. "Marcus? Who told him your grandfather was just seeing conspiracies?" She gathered her folders. "Tomorrow you'll meet Agent Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. They need you to testify. Don't sign anything Marcus brings. Don't accept a settlement. When Marcus tries to withdraw your motions, file to represent yourself if you have to. And whatever you do, don't let on you're working with us. These people are desperate and they've killed for less." My stomach clenched. "Killed?" Elena nodded grimly. "2 families who fought back. One died in a house fire, lost all their records. The other died in a car accident on the eve of their hearing. Coincidence, maybe. But you need to watch your back." As she walked off into the growing dark, she called over her shoulder, "Marcus will call tonight with an offer you can't refuse. Don't take it. That's how they close the trap." I sat there a long time after listening to the breeze in the cottonwoods and the river moving steady and sure the way it always had. I thought about Grandpa's voice. "This land is in our blood, Jake. Don't let anyone take it from you." About the families on Elena's map, 53 in 3 counties, all robbed by the same faces. On the drive home, my phone rang right on schedule. Marcus's number flashed. I almost didn't answer, but I wanted to hear him lie. "Jake, great news. Sterling's team just called. They're willing to go to $750,000, $750,000. Buddy, you could buy a house anywhere and still have money left." I looked out at the dark hills, the land my family fought for. "That's not even half what it's worth, Marcus." He was ready for that. "After legal fees and appeals, you might clear less. This lets you start over, no more headaches. Honor your grandfather's memory. Don't destroy yourself fighting for land you'll never get back." I kept my voice calm. I need to think. Don't wait too long. These offers vanish fast. If they think you'll be difficult, it's over. After he hung up, I sat in my car, looking up at the cemetery hill. 4 generations resting there, every one of them teaching the next that some things aren't for sale. Tomorrow I'd meet the feds. I'd start fighting for real. But tonight I just sat in the dark, mourning the friend I'd lost and the innocence I'd never get back. The war for my family's legacy was about to begin for real. This time I wouldn't be fighting alone. The Yellowstone County Courthouse stood like a stone sentinel, 3 stories of gray granite and marble windows gleaming under Montana's wide blue sky, casting long shadows across the plaza out front. It was built to impress, to intimidate, to remind folks that justice was supposed to be solid, permanent, unyielding. But that morning, as I walked up the steps with my evidence folder tucked under my arm and a knot the size of a fist in my gut, it felt more like a coliseum. One where I was about to find out if my family's legacy would survive or be swallowed up for good. 30 minutes earlier, I'd fired Marcus Carter, right there in the courthouse hallway, loud enough for every lawyer and bailiff to hear. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Jake," he hissed, mask slipping. "You can't win this without real representation." I told him I'd take my chances with honesty and courage over skilled betrayal. That got a few raised eyebrows from the courthouse regulars. Inside, I sat at the plaintiff's table alone. All I had was my handwritten notes, Elena's evidence, and 4 generations of stubbornness burning in my chest. On the other side, Karen Whitfield had hired a Seattle law firm with 4 attorneys in suits that cost more than my first car. The gallery was packed locals on both sides. Elena sat in the 3rd row digital recorder, hidden in her purse. Mrs. Henderson front row clutching her rosary like a lifeline. On one side, families who'd known us for decades. On the other, Karen's new money supporters, the ones who wanted golf courses and gates and progress. Judge Patricia Hawkins strode in black robes, swishing gray hair pinned tight. 23 years on the bench, known for being tough but fair. She wasted no time. This is a hearing on the plaintiff's motion for preliminary injunction to halt construction and reverse the alleged fraudulent transfer of the Morrison Ranch property. "Mr. Morrison, I understand you're proceeding pro se?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I recently discovered my former counsel had conflicts of interest." "Very well. Please proceed." I'd rehearsed this 100 sleepless nights, but my mouth was dry and my heart pounded so loud I thought everyone could hear. I looked at Mrs. Henderson, who nodded encouragement, then started. "Your Honor, my grandfather, Robert Morrison, was the victim of systematic elder abuse and fraud. On October 15, 2019, someone forged his signature on documents transferring our ranch to the Sunset Valley HOA for $50,000. At that time, he was unconscious on a ventilator 3 days before his death. I held up the hospital records. He couldn't have signed anything. Objection from the defense. Medical records can't prove what someone could or couldn't do on specific dates. Judge Hawkins overruled. Continue, Mr. Morrison." I pressed on. "The sale was notarized by Elizabeth Park. According to state records, she died in March 2017, almost 2 years before this sale. Dead people don't notarize legal documents." A ripple ran through the room. Even some of Karen's supporters looked rattled. The defense attorney, David Blackstone, smooth as bourbon, stood up. "Your Honor, this is a grieving grandson unable to accept his grandfather's decision. Robert Morrison was facing overwhelming medical bills, property taxes, and the burdens of aging. He reached out to the HOA for assistance months before his stroke. Their witnesses paraded through financial experts' records showing mounting expenses, and finally Karen herself, soft-spoken, dressed in conservative gray, dabbing her eyes. "Robert called me in July," she said, voice trembling. "He was drowning in expenses and wanted to preserve his dignity. We discussed options for him to remain on the land for life." All lies. I wanted to shout but didn't know the proper procedure. Objection, there's no written record of this arrangement I managed to get out. Sustained, Judge Hawkins ruled. Mrs. Whitfield, do you have documentation? She shook her head. He was old-fashioned about paperwork. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Impossible to prove. Impossible to disprove. Blackstone wasn't done. Your Honor, we'd like to call Marcus Carter as a character witness for the plaintiff. My blood ran cold. Marcus walked up, face a mask of concern. I've known Jake 15 years. We were law school roommates, close friends. He asked me to review the case. Blackstone asked, "What was your assessment?" Marcus looked at me, sadness in his eyes, I now recognized as a lie. I advised Jake that while his grandfather's death was tragic, the documents appeared in order. The timeline was tight, but not impossible. I became concerned about Jake's mental state. He accused me of conspiracy, grew paranoid. I offered to withdraw, but he was verbally abusive. I sat there frozen as my oldest friend spun a story that made me sound unhinged. Every word was true on the surface, but the context was gone. My anger was justified, the betrayal real. Judge Hawkins called a recess. I slumped in my chair. They'd twisted my evidence into paranoia, my grief into instability. Elena appeared by my side. It's not over. You still get a rebuttal. Marcus just committed perjury. We have the recordings to prove it. She pressed the digital recorder into my hand. Back in session, my turn came. Your Honor, I have new evidence. An audio recording of Karen Whitfield and David Sterling discussing their arrangements with Marcus Carter, my former attorney. Objection from the defense. Improper, illegal recording. I replied, this was made in a public building under Montana law. There's no expectation of privacy in public areas. Judge Hawkins pondered, then nodded. I'll allow it subject to authentication. Elena stood and gave sworn testimony identifying the time, place, and context. Then we played the tape. That's what we pay Marcus for. He'll manage the legal process, keep Morrison focused on settlement instead of discovery. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hawkins called for order. Marcus stood to leave, but security blocked the doors. Mr. Carter, return to your seat. Elena presented more bank records, timelines, evidence that mapped Marcus's payments and betrayals across 3 counties. When it was over, Judge Hawkins didn't even leave to deliberate. Based on the evidence, particularly the audio and the documentation of systematic fraud, I grant the plaintiff's motion. The property transfer is voided pending full investigation by authorities. The room exploded, cheers from my side, howls from Karen's. Hawkins wasn't done. This matter is referred to the FBI for federal investigation and the state bar for inquiry into Mr. Carter's conduct. As the gallery cleared, Elena squeezed my shoulder. Phase 1 complete. Now comes the interesting part. Across the courtroom, Karen sat ashen-faced. Marcus was led out in cuffs by federal agents. We'd won. But as I was about to learn, that was just the first battle. 5 months after Judge Hawkins dropped the hammer in that packed courtroom, I stood on those same courthouse steps, except now the air felt electric, charged with the energy of justice finally coming home to roost. The Yellowstone County Sheriff's Department was hosting a public auction, the kind that draws out every looky-loo lawyer and tire kicker in the valley. Only this wasn't just any auction. This was the selling off, piece by piece, of everything Karen Whitfield and her cronies had built with their greed. Karen was there, but she didn't glide up in her usual luxury SUV. No, she arrived late, looking like a ghost behind the wheel of a battered Honda Civic, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, her once perfect hair hanging limp. Her Mercedes had been repossessed the week before, her fancy condo frozen by court order, every asset tied to her crimes stripped away. She searched the crowd, like maybe, just maybe, one of her old supporters would meet her gaze, but all she found was a sea of people eager to watch her fall. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer boomed, his voice echoing over 200 spectators. We'll begin with lot number 1, the Sunset Valley Community Clubhouse and associated facilities, currently appraised at $400,000. I watched from the back, Elena at my side, as local investors jockeyed for the opening bid. It didn't take long for the price to shoot past 100 grand. At 150, things slowed. I could feel the anticipation tighten around me. Then I stepped forward. 200,000. I called out, my voice cutting through the murmurs. Heads turned. Karen went white as a sheet. She knew exactly what this meant. The local investor bowed out. The gavel came down. Sold to Jake Morrison for $200,000. The crowd broke into spontaneous applause. I saw Mrs. Henderson smiling big in the front row, the Taylors cheering. Even some of the new residents who'd been Karen's biggest fans looked almost relieved. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. The auctioneer moved on. Lot number 2, the Sunset Valley Swimming Pool Complex and Recreation Facilities, appraised at $150,000. I didn't hesitate. $200,000, I said, voice steady as granite. Karen made a choked sound. Her little empire was being auctioned out from under her, and I was buying back everything she'd built on my family's grave. No one dared to bid against me. Lot after lot, the tennis courts, the maintenance building, every asset the HOA had ever owned, I bought them all. Elena leaned in, whispering, "Jake, you're spending a fortune. Are you sure?" I looked out over the crowd, remembering my grandfather's calloused hands, the old barn we'd lost. "I'm spending what Karen thought she stole from my family," I said quietly. "And I'm buying more than just real estate. I'm buying justice." Finally, the auctioneer held up the deed for Unit 47 Sunset Drive, Karen's personal condo. Opening bid $25,000. I raised my hand, felt the weight of 4 generations behind me. $300,000. The crowd gasped. Even the auctioneer looked shocked. There was silence. No one would dare challenge me for the right to evict Karen Whitfield from her own home. Going once, going twice, sold to Jake Morrison for $300,000. This time the cheers were thunderous. Karen started to cry. Mascara running down her cheeks, standing all alone while the crowd celebrated the end of her reign. I wasn't interested in revenge for revenge's sake, but I wasn't about to pass up the chance for one last bit of closure. I walked straight over to her notice to quit in hand. "Karen Whitfield, as the new owner of record, you have 30 days to vacate Unit 47. Failure to comply will result in removal by the sheriff's office." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Jake, please, I have nowhere to go. I've lost everything. Legal bills, the criminal charges, You lost everything the day you decided to steal from a dying man," I said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "But you've got 30 days. That's more than you ever gave anyone else." As Karen climbed into her Civic and drove away from the place she'd once ruled, I felt an ache in my chest. Part grief, part relief, part pure exhaustion. My grandfather's land was safe, his name cleared, and the people who'd preyed on my family, on dozens of families, were facing real consequences for the first time in their lives. Elena came up beside me, a quiet satisfaction in her eyes. "How's it feel to own an entire HOA?" "Like holding a weapon that used to be aimed at me," I said, watching the last of Karen's supporters slink away. "Now it's a shield, and the first thing I'm doing, first." I turned to the crowd and raised my voice. "Effective immediately. HOA fees are cut by 70%. Every one of Karen's oppressive rules is abolished. And from now on, all major decisions will be put to a membership vote." The cheers went up again, folks hugging, clapping each other on the back, some even crying. I walked over to Mrs. Henderson, handed her a copy of the new bylaws. "This is for you, for everyone who stood up even when it was hard." I looked at Elena, who was grinning now. "You're not just rebuilding a ranch, Jake. You're rebuilding a community." I nodded, feeling the weight of it settle heavy, but good. "Yeah, but we're not done yet." Because I knew the real work was just beginning. 6 months later, if you'd asked me what justice looked like, I'd have pointed you right back to that old ranch gate, the one Karen's crew tried to weld shut and slap with a no trespassing sign. Except now the only sign hanging there was painted by a bunch of second graders from the local school with sunflowers, horses, and the words "Welcome to the Morrison Family Memorial Garden." Where Sterling's bulldozers had once torn up my great-grandfather's pastures, now you could see kids planting native wildflowers, neighbors stringing up new fencing, and folks hauling in picnic tables for the season's first potluck. The ranch house itself, my home, had been rebuilt stone by stone, wood beam by wood beam, thanks to restitution money and a hell of a lot of neighborly sweat. The porch where Grandpa once sat telling stories now served as headquarters for the Montana Rural Property Rights Foundation, our new legal aid group. Elena and I co-founded it after that last courtroom victory. She ran the show, really turned her pain into a kind of engine helping families all over the state get justice. We started small, a few calls, some paperwork for scared ranchers who didn't trust lawyers anymore. Word spread. By spring, we'd helped 12 families recover land, expose 3 more attorney HOA scams, and even got a bill pushed through the legislature requiring outside oversight for any property transfer involving an HOA. Some mornings I'd walk out onto the porch and watch the sunrise spill gold over the hills, just like when I was a kid. And I'd hear laughter from the yard kids running wild, finding old horseshoes, Mrs. Henderson telling them stories about how the garden grew from a battlefield. I watched Elena pouring lemonade, her hair lit up in the sun, and I realized somewhere along the line, this fight had made us a family too. One day, 8-year-old Sarah Taylor came running up, dirt on her face and a rusty horseshoe in her hands. "Mr. Morrison, look what I found. Was this your grandpa's?" I knelt down, took the horseshoe, and felt the years slip away. "Yeah, Sarah, that probably belonged to one of his horses. He used to say every piece of metal on this ranch had a story." Her eyes were wide as Montana sky. "What's the story of this one?" I looked over the wildflowers, the new fences, the line of names chiseled on a simple granite monument in the middle of the garden. "This is the story of people who never gave up even when they were scared. It's about honest work and standing up when something's wrong, and how families help each other out, especially when the world says you're finished." At the garden center stood that monument, the names of all 53 families who'd lost property to Karen's scheme, along with the acreage stolen and the dates. Below the names, a single line, "In memory of those who lost their land and in honor of those who fought to reclaim justice." Elena brought over a pitcher of lemonade and paper cups for the kids. Over the past months, she'd become more than an ally. She was my partner in every sense of the word. She ran the foundation, kept the books organized, volunteers wrote speeches. When she smiled, it was real, like she could finally see a future that didn't hurt. FBI called, she told me one afternoon sitting beside me on the porch steps. Karen pled guilty to all 15 charges, 8 years federal full restitution, and barred from any kind of property management for life. Marcus 7 years, but he's flipping on the rest of the network. 4 states now, not just 3 counties. I nodded, feeling both satisfaction and the ache of betrayal that never quite healed. He'll have a long time to think about it. But I'll never understand how someone can sell out their own neighbors like that. Elena touched my hand gentle. "Because some people only see what they can take, not what they can build." I looked out over the cattle grazing the fences. We'd rebuilt the little memorial garden that had grown in the spot Sterling once mapped for luxury condos. "Do you ever wish we'd just taken the settlement?" she asked. "Never," I said, no hesitation. "Some things aren't for sale, legacy family, knowing you did the right thing. Grandpa always said the land would test you, see if you were worthy. This was our test." The work didn't stop. Every week, more families drove up our dirt roads, scared, angry, sometimes close to giving up. We'd pour them coffee, help them find the records and the courage to fight back. Mrs. Henderson became our unofficial historian, writing down every case, collecting stories, so nobody would forget how quickly justice can vanish if you're not paying attention. As summer gave way to fall, the foundation's porch became the heart of the valley again. Neighbors stopped by to swap news, lawyers from Helena, and Billings sent referrals. Local lawmakers visited to see how real people fixed what the system broke. One afternoon, Mrs. Henderson's granddaughter tugged my sleeve. "My grandma says you're a hero. She says you saved us from the bad people." I smiled, the words both humbling and heavy. "Your grandma's the hero. She told the truth when nobody wanted to listen. That's how you start to fix things." In the evenings, Elena and I would walk the pasture's wind chimes. Grandpa built tinkling on the old fence line, the air sweet with clover and the first hint of winter. We talked about the future, about using the settlement money and auction proceeds, not just to rebuild, but to offer scholarships, plant orchards, create a place where families could come to remember what was lost and celebrate what was saved. I never regretted turning down the offers, never wished for an easier path. Grandpa's headstone, worn but standing proud, reminded me every day some battles you fight not to win for yourself, but for everyone who'll come after. And just when I thought life might finally slow down, a convoy of cars kicked up dust on our drive. Families from all over Montana and beyond coming for a community supper, a legal seminar, or just to share their stories. Elena shook her head, grinning. Another busy night at the foundation. The best kind of busy, I said, watching as neighbors gathered on the porch, swapping stories, passing food, planning the next fight for justice. My grandfather's land had become something more than a ranch. It was a living testament to what people can do when they stand together, a beacon for anyone who thought the world forgot about fairness. As the sun dipped behind the hills and the stars began to appear, I knew that our real inheritance wasn't the land, but the lesson that justice is worth the struggle, and sometimes when you fight hard enough and refuse to give up, you really can win. The world never quite goes back to normal after a fight like that, but you find something better if you're lucky. Months turned into a year. The land changed, the people changed, even I changed. And somewhere in all that healing, I learned that legacy is as much about what you build from the ashes as what you protect from the fire. Every week brought something new. The ranch, once under siege, now thrived as the hub for a growing movement. Elena and I poured ourselves into the foundation, sometimes working till midnight side by side, sorting paperwork, returning calls from desperate families as far away as Idaho and North Dakota. Our mission grew. We fought not just for our neighbors, but for anyone caught in the gears of HOA corruption and land theft. We lobbied for stronger state laws, hosted workshops teaching folks how to read deeds, spot forgery, find honest legal help. Kids from 3 counties came to plant trees in the memorial garden, each one named for a family that got their home back. The cattle returned to the pastures the fences held, and every time I walked out before sunrise, I could feel the presence of those who came before me, whispering in the wind, "Don't ever let them take it from you." We kept a wall of photos inside the old ranch house, black and whites of my grandfather, grainy Polaroids, from the first victory party after the auction, a wide shot of the courtroom on the day Judge Hawkins made her ruling. But the best picture was the one of a crowd on our porch, families eating together under lanterns, smiles, wide scars showing proof that loss isn't the last word. Mrs. Henderson was there for every big moment, always with a story or a lesson from the old days. She kept the foundation honest, reminded us to write everything down, and never let any of us forget whose shoulders we were standing on. She started a little tradition, too. Before every big community meeting, she'd have us recite the line from the Garden Monument, in memory of those who lost their land and in honor of those who fought to reclaim justice. Funny thing, those words got a lot of us through the hard days. Elena became the soul of the project. She spoke at national conferences, wrote op-eds, and mentored law students who wanted to do more than just bill hours. Sometimes I'd catch her standing alone at the edge of the garden looking out over the valley, and I'd know she was thinking about her family, what was lost, and what we'd managed to save for the next generation. I understood that look more than anyone. Some grief never fully leaves you. But she also carried hope, and she spread it around like wildflowers. I started teaching again. Informal, sure, but practical stuff. How to read a land survey, how to spot a predatory contract, how to use public records to protect your family. Parents brought their kids, and before long, teenagers were volunteering at the foundation, eager to help their elders fight back. We had a whole new crop of Morrison kids running around, and the sound of their laughter felt like a promise the world might be getting better after all. And the state finally took notice. The legislature passed a bill we helped write requiring every HOA in Montana to submit to annual audits, banning conflicts of interest for lawyers and setting up a hotline for whistleblowers. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. On the first anniversary of winning the land back, we held a gathering. Neighbors, lawyers, law students, journalists. Even Judge Hawkins came by, plain clothes, sipping lemonade and shaking hands with the folks she'd helped save. I gave a little speech on the porch, not my strong suit, but folks said it hit home. I told them, we're not just fighting for dirt or fences. We're fighting for the idea that justice still matters. That in America, your family's name and your word are worth more than any developer's checkbook. That when good people stick together, there's not a crook alive can take what's ours. The crowd cheered, and I swear for just a minute you could feel the old spirits, my grandfather, Elena's parents, every neighbor we'd lost standing there beside us, proud. That night, as the last lanterns flickered out and the sky filled with stars, I sat with Elena on the porch steps. The valley was quiet except for the wind through the cottonwoods and the distant sound of cattle lowing. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You ever wonder how many people got a second chance because of this mess? She asked, voice soft. Sometimes I think about how close we came to losing everything I said. But then I look at this, at you, at the families we helped, at all this stubborn hope, and I figure maybe that was the point. Maybe we had to lose the old way to build something better. We sat there a long time watching the sky. I thought of Grandpa, the man who fought for every inch of this land, who warned others, even as his own strength failed. I thought of the Wilsons, the Taylors, the 53 names carved in granite, and the hundreds more yet to come. I thought about justice, not as a thing you get, but a thing you fight for over and over. The next morning I woke early, walked out past the garden, past the headstones, past the new trees that would one day shelter a whole new generation. The sun was coming up gold and bright and full of promise. I knelt in the grass and pressed my palm to the earth, feeling the heartbeat of everything that came before. Don't let anyone take it from you, I whispered one last time for the old man, for myself, for anyone out there still fighting. And if you're hearing this now, if you're staring down your own battle, if the system's got its boot on your neck, remember this, you're not alone. Sometimes the law gets bent. Sometimes people betray you. Sometimes the fight feels endless. But there are still good folks in this world, and if you stand your ground and keep pushing, you just might win a piece of it back. So tell your story. Find your allies. Don't give up, not for anything. Because the only thing stronger than greed is a community that refuses to quit. What did I learn through all this? Probably nothing the easy way, but I'll say this. Justice is never a straight line, and sometimes it's damn hard work, but it's worth every scar. If you've made it this far, I hope you remember that. And if you ever find yourself on the losing end, well, you know where to find us. Our porch light's always on. Shh.